We have a special treat today. Our good friend Paula Butler from Standing Stone Nubians. If you don't know what that is, you're about to learn. We are going to make cheese today. So Paula, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so looking forward to this because I'm a cheeseaholic.
Oh, good. Well, I love making cheese, and I've been doing it now for about 4 years. And the whole reason I actually purchased my Nubian dairy goat herd is to make cheese, because I love it, and we were purchasing it so much, and one of my kids was lactose intolerant, and we decided we would get the goats and drink the milk and for all the health benefits and start making cheese.
Terrific.
So,
was it hard to learn?
It's just following a recipe and getting to know it, and then once you learn the basics, you can start playing around. And you know, my whole little saying is that milk, you know, cheese is just milk's leap towards immortality. You know, and I love it. I have pounds stored in my freezer. Anytime you have too much milk, you make cheese and throw it in the freezer.
And so this is something that we can really learn to do and can kind of become a fun hobby.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I've never made cheese, so tell me how the whole process starts, because I know we've got our boiling water here, and explain to me why we're doing this and what's going on.
Okay, well, the reason why we want to boil the water is to sterilize. Sterilization is very important as far as how we're able to make sure that we don't have extra bacteria. We want to put bacteria in that cheese, but we want to choose what that bacteria is.
Excellent.
So we go ahead and boil the water. I put everything in the pot that I'm going to use and everything I'm going to use during the process into the water and let it boil for 20 minutes.
Okay, Paula, tell me why we're using this particular pot.
I personally prefer to use stainless steel. We can use stainless steel, enamel, or glass. What we don't ever want to use is aluminum. Aluminum, of course, will leach the aluminum into the milk itself. But really what we're looking for are pots that are non-reactive to the acid levels that we're going to use during our cheese making process.
That's right, because acid's key in making cheese.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we've let this boil for 20 minutes, you say. So now we're actually going to recycle this water.
Because you can't cook your milk on the stovetop directly. You'll have to worry about curdling and things like that. We go ahead and we like to do it in a double boiler. Well, the easiest thing I found is just to take, if you have the ability of like a double sink or something, take this water, pour it into your sink, and just use that to heat up our milk.
Okay.
Because we are going to bring our milk up to 80 degrees. And that just is for this recipe. With cheese, we bring our milk to all different temperatures depending on what we're making.
Okay, good. So now we're going to take this to the sink.
Yes. All right. Now we're going to pour this water into the sink. Perfect.
Okay. And now what's the next step, Paula?
Is to go ahead and pour our farm fresh raw goat's milk into the pot, which was just milked yesterday.
Excellent. So this is like as fresh as it gets, isn't it? Okay. Yep. And we're pouring this into the same pot that we had the warm water in.
Exactly.
Okay. And how much are we using?
We're going to use a gallon.
Okay.
And with this particular recipe, you can always split it in half.
Oh, great. Okay. So
if you double it, triple it. Some of the more advanced cheeses, some of the harder cheeses, Parmesan, Stilton's, things like that, you don't want to double, triple your recipe without making other adjustments.
Okay.
But with Chevre, you can just double it, triple it, and just triple your recipe just like you would anything else.
And obviously, fresh, unpasteurized milk has a different flavor than pasteurized milk. So this is really going to enhance the flavor of the cheese, won't it?
Yes. We want to get the milk moved around so that the milk that first hit the bottom of the pan doesn't start to curdle or anything. We like to use these ladles with the holes in them so we can stir and make sure that the milk goes through them, and when we start adding things like our cultures and our rennet or anything that we add when we're making our cheese, that it can get all the way through all the cheese. Okay. And we also, in general, just like to do an up and down motion, even though at this point you could do a regular stirring motion. But I always tell people just do up and down motion, because it's hard to remember, oh, I've got to do up and down now because I've added something.
Right.
But I don't need to do it now. So my rule of thumb is you just do an up and down motion whenever you're dealing in your cheese.
Okay, good, because that's not a normal way to stir.
No, it's not.
Okay, great. So that's going in the warm water. Yes. And you say we're doing this because it's safer to heat it in this warm water than it is to heat it on the stove.
Exactly.
And our optimum temperature that we're bringing this to is what?
For this recipe, it's 80 degrees.
Okay. Oh, so that's happening pretty quickly.
Yes, it does. Like right now, we're at 66 degrees.
Okay, so
68. See how quick it's moving?
Yeah.
So we're gonna just let it set for a second and stir it every once in a while.
Okay, and tell me about your This is Nubian milk?
Yes.
Tell me about a little bit about that.
I have a herd of Nubian goats. They're the really cute ones with the long ears.
Yeah.
The reason why I chose Nubians and why a lot of cheesemakers do is because they have the highest butterfat content of any of the large breed goats. So we end up with more butterfat, which is optimal for cheese making, and get that creamy cheese. And it's also just a wonderful flavor. Most people that taste it will say that it tastes far superior than any of the other breeds. I don't usually wait till it says it's 80 degrees because it's going to keep rising.
Right.
I usually go ahead and pull it at like 78, 79, knowing it's just going to finish and settle out around where I want it.
Okay.
Now, if you have the ability to milk your own goats, generally what I do is I just use the morning's milk from that morning, and that's been chilled, then I go out and milk that evening, and I just combine the two, and it almost always hits at about 80 degrees.
Oh, okay.
Because the milk comes out of the goat at 104.
Got it.
So then you add it in with the cold milk from the morning, and it just lands there, and then you don't have to worry about any of the water process
that we've done. But
exactly.
You'll still do the water to sterilize your instrument. Okay, got it. Okay, so we've got this nice warm milk, Paula. Now explain to us what rennet is. I mean, I grew up with dairy cows, so I know what it is, but a lot of people might not understand. And where do you find it?
You can buy rennet at any cheese-making supply house. There are several different types. There's an animal rennet, which is what I use, and I choose to use animal rennet because the type of cheese I want to make is kind of an old world style cheese. There's also vegetable rennet that's made from various vegetable products. It's made out of thistle generally. And that is totally vegetarian. And then there's also a synthetic rennet, which a lot of people probably enjoy. I don't like to use it because I'm using raw goat's milk and going to all the trouble of having natural stuff. I don't really feel the need to use a synthetic rennet.
Right. And you were telling me that you always dissolve rennet in water.
Right. Rennet always has to be diluted in water for every recipe.
And then in addition to rennet, we've also got another culture that we add, and tell us about this.
There's a number of different cultures. We probably don't want to get too much into it. We have cultures we call mesophilic cultures, which is what this is, which is for cool cheeses. Cheeses we don't have to cook. So if you see a recipe and it's only bringing you to 80, 90, or 100 degrees, then you're going to use a cool culture.
Okay.
And if you don't want to, find a culture, or you don't think, I don't know if I'm going to make cheese to spend this much money on culture, anytime a recipe calls for a mesophilic culture, you can just use buttermilk.
In the same proportion?
Cultured buttermilk. Generally, if it's a quarter teaspoon of culture, it's a quarter cup of buttermilk.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay.
And the low-fat buttermilk does not work.
Oh, okay, got it. So it's got to be full fat.
That whole cultured buttermilk.
Okay, and then all we're doing then is just stirring this into our warm milk. Okay,
exactly.
Show us how to...
And again, we need to check our temperatures.
Okay.
And one of the tricks is if you accidentally you walk away and you bring your milk up to 82, 84 degrees and the recipe called for 80, doesn't matter. Just give it a minute to come back down. You haven't ruined anything.
Okay, good. So it's a little wobbly with...
This particular cheese, which is why I like to start it for most people, it's a very forgiving cheese.
Good.
A lot of the harder cheeses, the Parmesan, Stiltons, those are, non-forgiving cheeses. It's kind of like making a souffle.
Okay, let me see what this looks like as you put this in here.
It's just a
okay,
powder.
Okay, so it almost looks like dry buttermilk.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you can just sprinkle it right in. You don't have to dilute it or do anything special.
Excellent.
And since we sterilized this in our boiling water, I don't mind sticking it in my milk.
All right, great.
And now we're going to use our up and down motion again.
That's just so not a way to stir.
I agree.
I'm glad you said that though, because I wouldn't have known what up and down stirring was.
We do it for a number of reasons. One, besides the fact that it allows the milk to not be so agitated, which is what you don't want, especially goat's milk. It's not nearly as forgiving as cow's milk. It starts to break down on its own as soon as you start to add stuff, so we don't like to do a lot of swishing and swirling. And also, when you do the up and down motion, if you have to stop it, it just stops really quick if you just turn your ladle.
Got it.
So we've got that nice and mixed in.
All right, now it's rennet time.
So now we're going to add in...
That's a third of a cup of water.
To 2 drops of rennet. Now when you buy your rennet, you have to be really careful because it comes in 2 types. It comes in double strength and single strength.
Oh, and what are we using?
We're using...
Oh, now that's interesting how you did that.
Yeah, I like to make sure it gets all throughout the pot. We're using double strength. It's a lot less expensive than single strength. So if you see a recipe, generally all the older recipes and recipe books are single strength.
Okay.
So if it says 2 drops of rennet or 1, make sure you adjust it. Or Now the interesting thing with rennet is it's a very important process in cheese making. Too much rennet and you'll have like a rubber ball.
Oh, great.
Too little rennet and it'll just be liquid milk. It'll never coagulate properly.
And didn't you tell me that you store this in the refrigerator?
Yes. The rennet stays in the refrigerator and all of your cultures stay in the freezer.
Okay, got it.
And the rennet will last up to 2 years as long as you maintain it that way.
Okay, now is this where we just sit and wait?
We are done at this point. Basically, we've pretty much done everything we need to do to make Chevre. All we need to do is put a lid on it.
Okay.
And set it aside. And it can sit
how long at room temperature?
Room temperature being between 68 and 72.
Got it.
That's what it loves. Anything over that, you've got to adjust your times. So if it's 74, 75 in the house, instead of saying this will take 12 to 24 hours, that's why you'll read a recipe and it'll say 12 or to 24 hours. That's kind of a huge leeway, but it's because it'll take 12 hours in the perfect optimum temperature, which is usually around 70 degrees. I find in a house full of animals and kids and everything else going on that the safest place is to just throw it in the oven.
In a cold oven, though.
In a cold oven, yes.
Okay, all right, just making sure.
Because generally, you know, my favorite time to make Chevre is in the evening, right before I go to bed, because as you saw, it took us, what, a couple seconds, a minute. Just do it, throw it in the oven, let it sit there all night. It's peaceful, nobody bothers it, and then I can just pull it out.
Okay, I'll get the oven door.
Great.
And then now we're ready to have fun.
Yes. We are going to put it
here.
Right over here. Now what we need to do, of course now, once you look at it, we have curds and whey.
Oh, that's beautiful. And of course the curds are at the bottom and the whey is the liquidy kind of light yellow liquid.
It's the watery substance that has removed itself from the milk. And then we have our curds and whey. So of course we need to drain off our whey.
Got it.
And we can either throw it down the sink. However, if you have a septic system, they do not love whey.
Okay.
So I have a septic system, so all of my whey goes to my vegetable garden. Tomatoes thrive on it. Your animals will love it, dogs, cats, and if you have chickens, it's like their favorite thing. It's protein.
Got it.
So it'll give you those really hard shells.
Okay, so now you've got a colander, but you've also got what looks like cheesecloth, but it's not.
Right. You don't want to use regular cheesecloth. Some recipes you'll see just on the internet and things like that will say to use cheesecloth. Cheesecloth, if you are familiar with it, as I know you are, well, it just starts to shred, and that's going to get into your cheese, so we don't want that.
Right.
So we have a couple of options. When you order your rennet and your culture, you can order a bag from a cheese-making supply house.
Okay.
Which is just a bag to fill it with your curd and hang it up. However, they're fairly expensive, and they're just not the easiest things to use in my opinion, because you're sitting there trying to get all your curd into this little opening.
Correct.
So a while back, I got a little trick from a friend of mine who's been making cheese for 40 years, and she said just to take a pillowcase, any pillowcase, I use white ones because I'm sticking with the whole dairy thing, and just cut it in half. Okay. And I use a cotton pillowcase. I wash that just like I do my towels and anything I use in cheese making. Just in the washing machine with Clorox only, no detergent, because I don't want any flavorings from that detergent or any scents or anything like that flavoring my cheese. And this way, it'll just wrap right over there, and obviously so much easier just to dump those curds and whey in there. I just kind of slowly pour the whey off. Okay.
But Paula, I mean, you've been so careful to let it be undisturbed, so.
Now it's time to disturb it.
Okay, I got it.
Just gonna go ahead and let it drop right in.
Oh, it smells so good.
So right from this point on, we want to tie it up to hang it.
All right. And because it's obviously still very moist.
Yes, and we need to let it drain. So the best way to do that is, because we're using, this bag can hold probably 3 gallons worth of cheese or curd. So I just want to tip it to one side, get it down into a corner.
Oh, okay.
Because your curd likes curd, so you want to keep it all together so it can kind of knit together. And then we just want to take it, drain out as much as we can on our own.
Oh, it looks like a pastry bag.
Yep. Turn it like this. And then we're just going to tie it with some string.
Okay. All right, so you've got some just any kind of like butcher's
Exactly,
kitchen
that's
twine.
what I use. I just use kitchen twine.
All right, and you've got a special way of doing this. You don't just tie it anyway.
No, the first thing I do is just make a regular, like I'm tying a pair of shoes.
Okay.
And then I take this excess and flip it over.
And why?
Just to get it out of my way.
Okay.
So it's not, because sometimes you'll use the whole thing if you're making a lot more curd.
True.
But because we just use a smaller amount of milk, then I tie together, and I like to make bunny rabbits, just like when we were kids. And that way I can hang it without worrying about it slipping.
Okay.
And then we can hang it. Now we have several options with this depending on your setup at home. You can hang it from your knobs on your cabinets. Some people would hang it from here. I don't, because I get nervous I'll break it.
Yeah.
You can take
because it's still kind of heavy.
Oh yeah, it is, absolutely. You could take a larger pot. If you had a larger pot, just grab a spoon, put it over the pot like that to hang it.
Got it.
So there's a number of things you can do. I know I have friends that have just put hooks in the side. They make cheese all the time, so it's just right there to hook up.
But this is so easy what you've done here.
Yes, so I just hang mine right here so it can drain. And of course, we have a TV ready one that we made yesterday, last night actually.
Oh, I love this.
And it's been hanging.
And it's still dripping just a
little bit. So we're going to take that one down and just replace it with this one.
Okay, got it. How do I know it's ready?
We want to start feeling for it. See, right now we're very squishy and liquid still pouring out of it.
Yeah.
Definitely not cheese.
Right, right.
Not cheese ready. And then we have this one that is squishy like cheese.
But really it's got...
Right, but it's pretty dry and there's not a ton of liquid still coming out of it. It's going to have a little bit of liquid and we want that. So we are ready to make some different types of cheeses and make sure when we open this that it's perfect. So I'm just going to cut the string off.
So you don't squeeze it out like toothpaste?
No, I want to open it up because this way, if I open it up and it's not ready, I can just tie it right back up.
Okay, oh, it looks perfect.
Now, we are perfect. It's exactly what I want to see. What you don't want to see when you open it, there's two things you could see. One would be like a hard sheen where it's, when you push on it, it's not soft.
Okay.
That means it's dried too long. You've left it hanging too long and it's actually developed kind of like a rind on the outside.
Like brie.
Right. You haven't ruined it. You really just have to throw it in the food processor with a little bit of goat's milk and it'll bring it right back to more of a whipped cheese.
Got it. We've got parchment paper here.
Yes.
And we're using parchment paper because it doesn't...
It won't rip. I can knead my cheese on it, toss it. I've tried a number of different things and it's the best way to do it and I'm sure that it's clean. I've just pulled it right out.
Right.
So I want to kind of flatten it out because I need to season it. Now, one thing, I say season it with salt, but you're not really seasoning it. Salt's actually part of the recipe. It's not a seasoning in cheese making, it's actually an ingredient.
Okay.
And what it's going to do is stop the cheese from continuing to ripen.
All right.
So a lot of times people call me up and they've said, oh, my cheese isn't working. It tastes terrible. I made it, it was great when it came out of the bag and today, 24 hours later, it tastes terrible. And then I start talking to them and I find out that, oh, well, we don't use salt. We don't like to use salt, so I didn't put any salt in it.
Ah.
So that bacteria in there that we put in the culture is just continuing to build acid. The salt stops it.
Got it. And you like sea salt.
So you can use sea salt or kosher salt.
Okay, either one.
Every day I use kosher salt, and then at the holidays, usually if I'm going to make cheeses, as gifts, I'll use some of the higher end sea salts for better flavoring, like Fleur de Sel or something like that. So usually for this amount of cheese, this is a half a gallon. This is from a half a gallon of milk, and this is how much cheese we have.
Okay.
Now earlier we used a gallon, so we'll have double this tomorrow.
Got it.
It's usually about a half a teaspoon per half gallon of milk. It's kind of the rule of thumb.
So a good couple of pinches.
We're just going to put it all in there, and
you can do it. Do you mix it or just leave it on the top?
No, I just stir it in. You can use your spoon. You can get your
you're going to do
hand
this
in
no
there.
matter what you flavor it with. You will
always right.
Got it.
If you wanted to freeze it, now is when you would do it. You don't want to freeze it after you've already put any kind of additives in it.
Okay.
The herbs don't do well when they're frozen. You just take it just like this, freeze it, pull it out, let it thaw, and then you can work with it again. Let's separate this up into, what do you think, 2 or 3 different types of things, and
Absolutely.
we can play a little bit?
Yeah.
We've got a bunch of good stuff.
Seasonings.
Me too. So usually what I do is I'll just take it and kind of just roll it into a log shape with your hands as best you can. And then once we get it, like this one wants to make 2 logs.
That's fine. We'll
just let it do it.
It's in the mood. Little Barbie logs.
And then we just put it in here. And you just kind of roll it, and that'll give you a nice smooth way to work it.
perfect.
You just make little log, just like that. This one I'm going to start with, one of my favorite recipes is a lavender, which I use fresh lavender buds. And you just add in some lavender into it, just like that. Usually about, depending on this amount of cheese, I'd put about a tablespoon in. You want to be able to see the buds because they're really pretty.
Yeah, and they're so aromatic.
And then we're going to use some honey.
And this is local honey, so it just kind of follows your whole theme of using the...
Good. Probably about a tablespoon. Stuff. And a little bit of pepper.
Okay, now I would have not guessed pepper, but that's a good...
I know. Peppers, you know, it's one of those things that you don't think it's in there, but a lot of times they're just thrown in. And we're just going to give it a good mix. Actually, Tammy, I think we need a touch more honey.
Okay, let's add just a little bit more. You say when?
Perfect.
Alrighty.
We'll get that mixed in.
Okay, and we've got a good plate to show that off when you get ready to...
Great. All right, so we're going to take this and just kind of roll it in a nice little log. And this one we're just going to put out as it is without waiting for it to set up. But of course, if you wanted to, you could do the same thing as we did with the other ones.
And wrap it in the
And wrap it just to make it a little more. And then what I love to do is just top it with some more lavender. Put some chopped walnuts on it.
Yeah, this is not going to be left over, I can tell you.
And then just drizzle a little bit more honey, really gently.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And then just the teeniest bit of cracked pepper on it.
And some nice low salt crackers would be perfect with that.
This is a wonderful one where we can just do chopped chives and garlic. This one, the garlic actually needs, I think, a little bit of time to just kind of settle in there, same with chive. I always make this the day before, even sometimes 2 days before. And because I use that aromatic culture, Floridanica is the type of culture we used, it really takes 3 days to fully ripen to peak. So the cheese just gets better and better each day.
And you could use anything. These herbes de Provence, you could use
those.
Yes,
this is one you see all the time in the grocery stores. You just would take one of those logs, put the herbs down. I don't like to put the herbs mixing them into the Chevre itself. I find they get kind of crunchy. They just don't set up very well. I prefer to take one of the logs that we set up and then just kind of roll it.
Excellent.
And then it looks beautiful. That way you're just kind of getting a crust.
I hope you've enjoyed, I certainly have, this cheese making extravaganza, and we're going to put these good cheeses to use, so stay tuned.
To learn more about cheese making workshops, visit our website at volunteergardener.org.
We're going to make a great recipe using fresh herbs from your garden and goat cheese. We're going to use chicken breasts that are going to be baked. It's going to be in the oven, baking, and dinner's going to be ready in a flash. Now let's start with that chicken. You're going to get you some nice split chicken breast and make sure the bone is in and the skin is on. Okay, now what you're going to do is just take your fingers and just loosen up the skin on the outside of the chicken breast. Don't pull it off, just loosen it up just a little bit. Then take some goat cheese and you're going to make kind of like a little smear. So you're going to generously put your goat cheese underneath there, and then once you get it in, you can kind of mash it like this and spread it evenly all over the chicken breast. So it's pretty even. You want a nice even smear of goat cheese. All right, then take a whole basil leaf and then just stick it underneath the skin. And I think I'm going to do a couple under each of these. I think it will look better. And what this is nice, it's kind of flavoring the goat cheese. It's keeping the chicken breast nice and seasoned. And because the skin is on there, it's also going to hold everything in place. And so what we're going to do after we get all of those done, let's just take these off, and we're going to season them on the outside, just on the top, with some pepper and some sea salt. And then I'm going to drizzle just a little bit of olive oil over the top. And that's it. Basically, you're ready to go. If you don't want to use basil, you can substitute any herbs from your garden. Chives, parsley, thyme, rosemary would be great on there. And then this goes in a preheated oven of 400 degrees for 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the size of your chicken breast. Just test it and make sure that it's cooked all the way through. And you've got a lovely herb and goat cheese stuffed chicken for dinner.